That may be one of the circumstances, but the offence, as far as the offence is concerned, it does not reduce the gravity of the offence.
But that invariably would be reduced. The gravity would get reduced.
Gravity would be reduced. That could be effective for reduction of gravity, but offence continues to be there.
Perhaps
because
that is the social aspect of it. As far as legal context is concerned, I feel it will not reduce the gravity.
It doesn't.
Because offence, yeah.
I was talking about the exception provided in the section. This could be a circumstance. And you know, most of the times this marriage may be also under pressure. We do not know what happens to the marriage after the sentence has been reduced.
And yeah, but Ms. Bhalla, don't you think in a case like that, even if the marriage is not under pressure, very often the victim may not have much of an option left because of the stigma attached with the sexual assault on the person?
Perhaps in that case, I will place it under the adequate reasons if we find that marriage is being solemnized voluntarily, because then they want to start a new life, and whatever has been done to the girl, that could not be redone. Now you cannot say that go to imprisonment for 10 years, then you start your family life. Then it could be adequate reason. But the adequate reason which the Supreme Court gives in this particular judgment, that there have been 14 years, the lady is married elsewhere, she is having 2 children, they do not seem to be adequate and special reasons. Those are not acceptable to me as a female who's simulating herself that what will happen to the pride of the women if this type of judgments will be coming from the apex court. Had it been trial court, had it been Supreme Court, we can think of that we can go to Supreme Court. And if the Supreme Court is giving this type of judgments which are likely to be quoted as precedents.
I think very valid argument. Ms. Sabharwal, how do you look, as a sociologist, how do you look at this development when a rapist agrees to marry a victim and the victim also agrees? Do you think they can lead a normal life after that?
No, look, as a sociologist, I would say yes, it's the cultural aspect. So maybe to get some kind of honor back, she would marry. Culturally, that would seem a okay thing to do. But as a psychologist would probably tell you, how do you live? Of course, I know women go on to live with rapist husbands anyway, who might rape them after marriage. That's a separate issue. But the point still is that such women cannot be happy women. And I'm not talking as a woman here at all. I'm taking it as a human problem. How does a victim live with the person who's perpetrated that kind of, violence on you? How do you just look and say, oh, ho gaya ab to, and this is the compensation I have, or that's the only way out? And if that's the only way out, what kind of solution is that?
Mr. Gupta, what is the system? I mean, does the offence get compounded, the sentence get compounded if the rapist marries the victim?
It's all in the realm of judicial discretion. It is the same bench here, Justice Karchu's bench, which has in a very proactive manner struck blow after blow for democratic liberties. Mere membership of unlawful associations, for instance, is not commensurate with the values of the Constitution. So I would not like to run down this bench. It is an unprecedented judgment, a perverse precedent to set in this particular case. They have a right to cross the boundaries, to push back the jurisprudential, even the constitutional envelope, but not in this manner. I see absolutely no justification for this exceptional exercise of power. And let me say on the question of marriage, though I believe rape is an offence sui generis, of its own kind, even more serious than murder. Even more serious than murders. There can be cases of murders being compounded, but
yes, in a murder, the other person is not living, but here, the person has to live with this problem.
Leaves behind an indelible trauma which only the woman who's been raped can share. Perhaps even she can never express it, especially in the Indian context. It requires courage of the highest kind to go public over rape. Having said that, I'm not very sure about the issue of the rapist marrying the victim. Once in a million, perhaps, but again, not a precedent.
Very Bollywoodish.
It's a very taxing, very challenging issue. I do not believe myself competent to answer that.
You've been reading such cases in the media, no?
Yes, you see, the problem is the judiciary goes after a fashion. So that's the danger of even specific ad hoc decisions geared to the necessities and exigencies of a case becoming a precedent for everyone. So if in one case you allow this, you have a bunch of cases following it. It's this danger, since a judicial decision is a norm for the future. So the inevitability of the case being treated as a precedent, even where the court says this should not be treated as a precedent, judges tend to follow it. I'm treating the issue of precedent here as a judicial value system, as a judicial as the institutionalization of judicial values, And what is most disturbing and regressive about this particular decision is the values, the mental universe or the ideological universe that it represents. Especially when it comes from a bench which has a woman member on it and which is basically a very liberal and democratic bench.
Justice Sood, let me repeat my earlier question. How often does the bench normally take recourse to extreme interpretation of the law?
Not very often. Not very often. Because you know, even if when you raise the point about marrying, the victim marrying the accused,
yes,
the victim in our kind of social setup probably has no other choice. We do not know whether she has willingly entered into this wedlock or not, because her family also probably would like her to marry that man, and she would be under pressure to marry that man, and then that man will go scot-free and still behave like that, like a criminal.
Mr. Gupta raised another point that often it becomes fashionable for the courts to follow, take recourse to a certain thing. I mean, one has heard various descriptions of the courts, but nobody ever called them fashionable
Mr.
before.
Gupta's way of describing it, but he's right in saying that some benches do take unusual decisions sometime, and they become precedents, and the danger in that is that they become precedents for others. This particular case, elaborating that point further, is right in saying maybe in this particular case there were factors which we do not know as yet. At least the reasons given in the newspapers are not adequate. Maybe, but this will become a precedent for the lower courts, which is a very dangerous trend.
So how could we avoid that?
We can't avoid it unless the Supreme Court reviews its own judgment.
Ms. Sabharwal, do you think the rich and the influential could actually use this judgment to perpetuate crimes of such heinous nature?
They've already been trying to use it. The ominous part is now the court itself seems to be on their side. That's for me a very, very ominous sign. Because earlier, I'm sure they try to give blood money when other things happen. Because what's happening here is the feeling is being given as if rape is like tsunami. It is a very natural thing. And you can rehabilitate this person and you can compensate. It's not like that at all. Because here it's like instead of finding ways to abolish, to eradicate this terrible crime, we are saying we have to learn to live with it and maybe find some softer options instead of punishing these guys. So it's okay for the girl also, wo bhi settle ho gayi, usko bhi paise mil gaye, and these guys also go on to live their lives. So very goody feeling they're trying to give you ki sab kuch theek thak chal raha hai.
Where all do we have this system, Mr. Gupta, of this blood money? I mean, is it prevalent in a lot of Islamic countries?
Perhaps in most of the Islamic countries, I'm not very certain because legal literature from these countries is not available. So I'm afraid I wouldn't like to plunge into general stereotyped prejudices about even the Islamic countries, but not in any of the rule of law countries. Even in America, where you have a very defined, elaborate system of plea bargaining, which I submit we should follow. Our system is too opaque, too stiff for that. There are cases not related to rape, a whole range of gamut of criminal cases where the process of trial could be shortened and justice could be done. Larger aspects of the situation, the social situation, the economic situation, the motivations for the crime, the possibility of rehabilitation could be taken into account. Activism in that direction is needed, but the courts are not really implementing that new chapter. They're still not alive to the sensitivities and the potential of that chapter. And yet you have cases once in a while. Of course, even from this bench or from the Supreme Court in general or from any high court, this is a most unusual judgment, truly without precedent. We normally use the term unprecedented loosely. This is truly without precedent. I'm not willing to say that being very critical of it.
That even Justice Sood agrees that it is not very usual.
Happened. I'm sure the court would realize it's been a very active court, and in that process of being active, this is one more judgment which I'm sure they would have realized the moment they delivered it, and if the public reaction comes pouring in, that they have done a grievous wrong to themselves.
Another aspect is that this punishment is given for an offence so that it serves as a deterrent to that man as well as to the others. Now, where is the guarantee if this man marries this woman, he will not commit rape again? Because there is a psyche. The criminals, there is a criminal psyche in a man which makes him commit these offences. And if we reduce the punishment, there is no guarantee merely because he has married the victim or he has compensated the victim, he will not repeat it.
Justice Sood, in this particular case, it took 14 years for the case to actually reach this winding up stage. And I think one of the reasons why the case turned, took this kind of a turn is also the delay in the final judgment. What should be done to speed up these cases?
Well,
Have more special courts?
we have more special courts. There is an amendment, I think Mr. Gupta would know much better, in the Civil Procedure Code that adjournments cannot be granted so liberally. They are making it time bound, but we are not implementing it.
And there has been a proposal to add such a proviso even in CRPC.
That's
but
right.
then the lawyers' lobby was totally against it, and that has not been materialized.
We have not taken any specific measures. We have not at least implemented them. On paper we may take some measures, but we have not implemented them, with the result that today cases.
So you've been a part of the bench, so what steps
It
did
is
the
for the
bench at that time
legislature.
take?
It is for the legislature. It is for the judges to implement, and you are right. Part of it is the responsibility of the bench. Part of it is the responsibility of the lawyers.
are
The lawyers
here.
as well, definitely.
Mr.
Except
Gupta,
that
before we wind up, the last word from you, what should be done to speed up such cases? 14 years for a rape case.
Could I just point out, 14 years for the trial not to be over, but for the appeal to be finally decided by the Supreme Court.
Yes, but even then 14 years is a long time.
And they have served only 3.5 years in jail. It's not that they have served a major part of their sentence in jail.
Yes.
So I would like to balance that out. So far as the larger problem is concerned, it is a problem which has multiple causes. And I really do not have the answer. We lawyers are definitely a part of
Mr.
the
Moily,
problem.
when he was here a couple of weeks ago, what he mentioned was that in the next 3 years, I think they will make sure that all cases are actually, even the appeals are decided
You
within
can afford
3
to say
years.
that because he's not on the bench.
No,
He's not part of the judicial apparatus.
Mr. Gupta, it's 3.5 years for those 3 gentlemen, but it's 14 years for the lady. Let's not forget.
And it will continue
That
even
would be
after
an
14 years.
And aggravating
This
circumstance.
must have been
Not
one
a
of the
mitigating
reasons why she, because going to the courts every day,
Yes.
this must be, maybe one of the reasons why she entered into this agreement.
Yes.
That I don't want to go
And
to the
not
court.
just 14 years, I think she'll have to live with this all her
Throughout
life.
her
The
life.
operation of the crime per se, but the operation of the trial.
Trial, yes.
That's what Justice Sood is hinting at. He's absolutely right there. But that is an aggravating circumstance, not a mitigating
Not a
one.
mitigating.
Absolutely.
And you need not to be very rich for that, because just paying off 50,000, you
No,
can.
but that, as everybody agreed, that even if it was 5 lakhs or 10 lakhs, that still doesn't mitigate the
No,
offence.
but still, as we are projecting, that is for the rich. You need not to be very rich. You can just pay off 50,000 rupees and you can
No, in
go
fact,
for
he's saying
free.
that you're making it even easier. At least
Easier,
एक करोड़
not
देना
only
होता
for
होगा,
rich.
कोई problem तो होती बंदे नो.
Absolutely.
5,000 anybody can
Since
give
you're
them.
running out of
50,000
time, thank you
everybody
very
can
much for joining us in the discussion. In compounding the 10-year sentence of 3 rape convicts following their compromise with the gang rape victim, the Supreme Court may have considered wider social aspects. However, it would now be the responsibility of the courts to ensure that this precedent is not misused by the rich and the influential. This case, which took 14 years to wind up, once again underlines the oft-repeated phrase that justice delayed is often justice denied. With that, we end this edition of Day and Night Prime. We meet again tomorrow with another issue. Till then, good luck and goodbye.